Behind me is the Bothwell Bridge, site of the famous Battle of Bothwell Bridge on the 22nd of June in the year 1679, and it was a final battle for the Covenanters. Hello again, and thanks for looking in on my channel. Those of you who follow my channel regularly will perhaps know a bit about the Covenanters, which I've been having a look at recently. You'll know a bit about the Covenanters' history by now. I'll mention a little bit of it anyway. One of the problems in the 17th century, the 1600s in Scotland, was that there was a division in the Protestant church between those who were willing to accept the Stuart king as being the head, the God-appointed head of the church, and to have the church administered by a system of bishops, an Episcopalian system. So that was a sticking point. People who objected to that were called Covenanters because they signed an article called the Covenant, and this national covenant said pretty much we'll only support the king if he gives us a right to practice our religion in the way we want and not using his prescribed prayer book and not having bishops. In a nutshell, so that caused a big division and active skirmishes where people were killed, people were decapitated, had their limbs taken off. All sorts of terrible things went on in the 1600s in Scotland. It was the same time when witches were being burned, for example, so people took very strong objection to things that didn't suit them and would kill people, execute people for their beliefs. So that's part of it. I'll read you some of the information that's online about the battle at Bothwell Bridge as well. I'll tell you about the battle. It was basically the King's troops or government troops versus Covenanters. The Covenanters' side were being led by a gentleman called Robert Hamilton. The Scottish government side was led by two people, the Duke of Monmouth and the Viscount of Dundee. So those were the belligerents, as they call them officially, in this battle. Scottish government and Covenanters. There were 5,000 Scottish, the King's troops, 5,000 of those versus 6,000 of the Covenanters. So the Covenanters would seem to be in a favourable position, but it didn't work out that way. Sadly, the Covenanters lost 600 people. Casualties and losses in the battle, and the Royalist troops lost a few, which is good if you're on the Royalist side. But it was the last battle the Covenanters fought against the government, and they didn't get to have their own rights restored until sometime afterwards, thanks to William and Mary, King William III, William of Orange. Well, I'll tell you how the battle went then. The Covenanters had established their camp on the south bank of the Clyde, north of Hamilton. The rebels numbered around 6,000 men, but were poorly disciplined and deeply divided by religious disagreements. So that doesn't augur well if they weren't really united. They had a few competent commanders, being nominally led by Robert Hamilton of Preston. Although the rigid stance against the indulged ministers, these were ministers who were just put up with at the time by the government, only encouraged division. The preacher Donald Cargill and William Cleland, the vicar of Drumclog, where there was a battle just 3 weeks previously, where the Covenanters had been successful, were present, as were David Haxton of Rathillet and John Balfour of Kinloch, known as Burley, who were among the group who murdered Archbishop Sharp on the 3rd of May. He was one of the, he was part of the Episcopalian system. He was an archbishop. The government army numbered around 5,000 regular troops and militia and was commanded by Monmouth, supported by Claverhouse and the Earl of Linlithgow. The Royalist troops were massed on the northern or Bothwell bank of the River Clyde and on sloping ground that included a field that has since become known as the Covenanters Field. not because a battle was fought there, but because for many years it was the venue for a Covenanters conventicle. That's a kind of prayer meeting that Covenanters held, organised by the Scottish Covenanters Memorial Association. The battle centred on the narrow bridge across the Clyde, the passage of which Monmouth was required to force in order to come at the Covenanters. Okay. Haxton led the defence of the bridge and had some initial success in the initial skirmishes. But his men lacked artillery and ammunition and were forced to withdraw after an hour. Once Monmouth's men were across the bridge, the Covenanters were quickly routed. Many fled into the parks of nearby Hamilton Palace, seat of Duchess Anne, who was sympathetic to the Presbyterian cause, and it was in this area that the final engagements took place. The numbers of Covenanters who were killed varies widely, with estimates ranging from 7 to 700, according to the Scottish Battles Gazetteer. Around 1,200 were taken prisoner. All those who had taken part on the Covenanter side of the battle were declared rebels and traitors, and the repression during this period has become known as the killing time in Covenanters' histories. If you look up Wikipedia, it will tell you the killing time was a period of conflict in Scottish history between Presbyterian Covenanter movement based largely in the southwest of the country and the government forces of Kings Charles II and James VII. Both Stuart kings. The period roughly from 1679 to the Glorious Revolution of 1688. Well, that would be another video, I think, at some point. Bothwell Bridge, largely rebuilt in the 19th century. That explains things, as you'll see looking at the video. I didn't have time to actually record the monument when I was there today, but you'll see it from the drone footage as well. Behind me is the Bothwell Bridge, site of the famous Battle of Bothwell Bridge on the 22nd of June in the year 1679, and it was a final battle for the Covenanters. They had 6,000 troops here. The army of the government had 5,000 troops, so they were outnumbered, but the army lost no troops at all, no casualties apparently, whereas the Covenanters lost 10% of their number. They had 6,000 troops and 600 were killed here or nearby near the racecourse in Hamilton. But have a look at the shots from the drone of the bridge itself. It's changed a lot, I think, in the last X hundred years. I'll turn this around and let you see it properly. That is the River Clyde, and that's Bothwell Bridge. In the past, I think it had 1, 2, 3, 4, I think it had 5 arches in the past, so I reckon some of it has been reconstructed, especially the ironwork on the top is new air, and there was a large kind of archway partway over as well, maybe for collecting tolls. So thanks very much for watching, and please give me a thumbs up, share it, do what you will, click a like at the least would be much appreciated. Thank you very much for looking in.